Morning.
Morning. Morning.
Well, Ray's there. He's obviously got video. I'll get hold of him.
Where to start? Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the first meeting of the WAPC for 2026. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. Welcome to those attending in person and online today. Commission members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in their deliberations. And I'd like to start the meeting by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. Apologies and leave of absence. We do have all members in attendance today. We have myself, Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Sandry and Commissioner Shears in person, and online today we have Commissioner Heron, Deputy Chair, Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Lakey and Commissioner Hall. So welcome to you online. In relation to requests for leave of absence, noting that we do have a couple of those, but they're not affecting this meeting. They have been tabled at SPC, so I don't need to read out. So I'll move to disclosures of interest. In relation to item 3.1, the proposed MRS amendment for the Pickering Brook town site expansion, Commissioner Brooks has declared an actual impartiality interest in that Commissioner Brooks advised that Urbaqua were engaged by the City of Kalamunda to provide a district water management strategy and the site soil evaluation for this site. The project was completed in October 2023, and whilst Urbaqua have no further involvement in the site, that is being noted as an actual impartiality interest, and Commissioner Brooks, I understand you'll be stepping out on the item. Thank you. In relation to item 4.4, information report for the WAPC, Commissioner Bennett has declared an impartiality interest in that her employer CLE has several items listed in the update. Now that item is for noting only and is simply a list of items. I'm happy to accept that as an impartiality interest, but if there are any questions or discussion on particular items that affect CLE, Commissioner Bennett has indicated she will step out of the meeting on those items. Commissioner's happy to accept that impartiality interest on that basis. Thank you all. And on the same report, Commissioner Sandry has also declared an impartiality interest in that the report outlines matters relating to the City of Bayswater, City of Nedlands, Urbanista Town Planning, which were lodged whilst Commissioner Sandry was a director pre-October 2023, and North Ellenbrook West as it relates to Cooper Road. On the same basis, Commissioner Sandry, if any of those items are raised for discussion, I understand you'd be happy, you will step out on those items. So again, members, are you happy to accept that as an impartiality on that basis? Thank you all. Disclosure of representation. Oh, sorry. Are there any further disclosures of interest for the meeting? No, thank you very much. On disclosures of representation, I do have one on item 3.1, the proposed MRS amendment for the Brook town site expansion. I have received 3 letters in relation to this matter, 2 from the City of Kalamunda, one dated the 15th of September and then the 28th of November 2025, and a letter from the Honourable Neil Thompson MLC, Shadow Minister for Planning and Lands, dated 23rd of January 2026 in relation to this item. In the normal course of my duties as chairperson of the WAPC, I have shared this correspondence with the WAPC members, and I have therefore not been provided with any additional information that members don't have before them today. Members, are there any other declarations of representation? Okay, thank you very much. A declaration of consideration. Can all members indicate that they have received and considered the agenda ahead of today's meeting? Thank you very much all. And confirmation of previous minutes. We do have 2 sets of minutes today to deal with. We've got the minutes from the ordinary meeting of the 26th of November 2025, as well as the determination of the ferry terminals meeting of the 11th of December 2025. Members, are there any comments or clarifications on either of the sets of minutes? No? Okay, happy to move those together. Thank you. If I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Hughes and seconded by Commissioner Bennett. Is there any dissent? Thank you. The minutes are carried. We also have ratification of out of session items that have been dealt with at the end of the year. They are in relation to item 1.7.1 through to 1.7.3, new government goals, position statement on public open space and WAPC strategic asset plan. Members, are there any questions in relation to any of those items that have been adopted out of session? Are you happy to deal with those en bloc? Yes, if I could please have a mover and seconder to ratify the out of session items. Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Brooks, seconded by Commissioner Herron. Any dissent? Thank you. They are carried. We now move to deputations and I will hand over to Sam. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. We have one deputation on the agenda this morning, which is on the item 3.1 on the agenda, which is the proposed MRS amendment for Pickering Brook Townside expansion. And we're welcoming the City of Callum, Nathan Ritchie and David Madolo. If you'd like to join us at the table in front of me here. So I do welcome you to the West Australian Planning Commission meeting this morning to deliver your deputation. You have been advised that the 3 minutes allocated to you this morning. A timer will appear on the screen which will count down that allocated time. And over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. To the Chair, Commissioners and acknowledging departmental staff, thank you for allowing the City to make a deputation. While I definitely acknowledge the officer's recommendation, the City respectfully seeks the Commission to initiate this amendment so we can all collectively engage in a planning process. The planned development of the Pickering Brook Townside has been identified in the City's local planning strategy since its preparation back in 2010, and it was endorsed by the Commission and then in 2013, which seeks to guide land use and development within the region. It had renewed support for this action with the progression of an MRS amendment through the recommendations of the State Government's Task Force and Working Group's findings, Part 1 report, which was published in November 2020. And I also acknowledge anyone who was in the room, but whoever was involved in that comprehensive review. These elements make it a very different genesis to other proposals in the peri-urban area or hills landscape, and that's one of the reasons as to why this should be considered different. Following the City's submission to the department, the preliminary referral process identified 2 focus areas. One was, I'll need to definitely read this out, the risk to the Middle Helena catchment area land use and water management strategy in compliance with the government sewage policy, and 2, the bushfire risk, where DFAS didn't support the proposed expansion of the town site due to concerns with bushfire risk and the information and recommendations in the fire management plan. In response, the City commissioned updates to the district water management strategy and submitted that information to the department in late 2022, which was at that time, based on officer advice, deemed to largely satisfy the matter, which is why the City was surprised to see this presented as part of the recommendation for not initiating. Only recently, and I need to address it well, DFAS has welcomed engagement with the City on the proposed mitigation for fire risk and strategic bushfire risk, and the City welcomes this proactive step. It's the first time DFAS has worked with the City to articulate their concerns at a strategic level rather than at a tactile grassroots level. Bushfire Planning Framework, Planning Policy 3.7, Planning for Bushfire Guidelines were all updated in 2024. The review of the BMP is necessary in order to address those changes to the new modified framework. The original work was produced back in 2020. While it's acknowledged that it's part of the process, the department has facilitated a peer review, but we haven't received guidance as what needs to be provided to meet the updated bushfire needs. Therefore, the supporting reasons for not supporting the proposal rely on the information in the reports and the technical documents, which are unfortunately out of date. Given the time taken to reach this point, it's more appropriate for the bushfire documentation to be brought up to date against the current legislation before any decision is made. And the City is working with DFAS to address this. It's implied in our planning framework that through an assessment, a proposal be considered to either pass or fail the planning test, whatever that test might be. it's conceivable that a planning proposal would have enough significant merit to be approved, but if not of having the opportunity to be tested, as department officers have recommended, it wouldn't have that opportunity. So engaging in a process like the MRS assessment, once initiated, will facilitate a full and complete assessment, acknowledging the flaws of the proposal and giving an opportunity for those flaws to be mitigated. Given the planning circumstances of this proposal, it warrants an opportunity to be fully tested. So in conclusion, I think I'm close to time, but in conclusion, the city requests that the Metropolitan Region Scheme amendment is initiated, enabling the city to work with DEFIS collaboratively via the application process to address these outstanding fire issues and any other issues that may arise through the consultation process. Or, and I always need to give an alternative for something like this as well, should the WAPC decide not to initiate the amendment, and we respect that, the city requests the WAPC defer its decision to allow the additional time for the city and DEFIS to progress and resolve the bushfire matters before making its decision. Thank you, and through the chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the deputation today. I'm sure there'll be questions for you, given the nature of the issues on the agenda today. If I could just start, if you could just elaborate a little bit more on this, on the liaison that you're having with DFES at the moment, because that is something that we are not aware of, and would like to hear from you about what is, what sort of discussions are taking place directly between the city and DFES.
Absolutely, and happy to be as transparent as we can with that. The city has for a long time been advocating for an additional bushfire facility out in the Pickering area to increase capacity. And through our advocacy through the last election, we were unsuccessful, but put a lot of effort towards that. And that started conversations with DFES at a more strategic level around why a secondary fire station would be required. Those conversations with different people led to different levels of solutions that were being put forward, particularly around increasing tank catchments within the area, increasing an alternative road access, admittedly not ideal, but something that the city is exploring. I think Dixon Road, it's out the back, but it takes you back across the top of the hills. And also having a place in which to say which would be the primary school. So we've started those conversations with DFES to better understand what level of investment would be needed for the whole area at a strategic level, rather than just at a tactical level through a bushfire management plan. So we've only just started those conversations. We've had some correspondence from DFES to say that they're kind of articulating what those key issues would be. No resolution has obviously been made yet, but that's where we're asking the opportunity to continue to work with them at that strategic level.
And have there been conversations with DFES land use planning team as well, given that that's, the advice that we're receiving is coming from the land use planning team? Have you had contact with that part of the agency?
I have, through the chair, I have to take that on notice just to make sure that they have, as any department would, have one consolidated approach for advice.
Waste, but yes.
Yes. So I would say that given that it's on their letterhead and it represents a strategic view, I would assume that there's a level of alignment within their department. But I can't accurately confirm that for you at this point.
Okay, thank you. And has that been shared with the departmental officers who've been assessing this matter?
Not that I'm aware of. No, it's something that we've taken on board to work with DFES from an advocacy perspective. But we were a little bit surprised given how long this proposal had been in the system that it was brought to a head quite quickly. So we thank for the opportunity to bring it to a head so we can have these discussions, but that was something that we were progressing with them. At this point, we didn't really have a solution in which to table or put on the table. That what we've got is identification of strategic issues, but no definitive solution as to how to resolve them. So
okay.
Apart from an agreement.
And see, other questions are coming up. So I'll go now to Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your deputation. I just one of the sentences you said is that the technical documents that we have in front of us, and I think you meant particularly around the DFES, is out of date. Obviously, we've got lots and lots of documents that's been around for a long time, and we're making decisions based on the information that we have currently got in front of us. So you're saying that the information that we've got, particularly from DFES, is not correct? I mean, it's an extension of the conversation, the question that you just had, actually. So I just want to get real clarity on that. Thank you.
Absolutely, and again, through the chair, the documentation that was produced for the bushfire plan was produced back in 2020. The framework has since changed. There was a peer review undertaken in that time period, and we, as the applicant, haven't updated that information to meet those contemporary needs. So we're still kind of left in this transitional space. Does that help to explain where we're currently at?
Okay, thank you.
And probably just to explore that a little further, I think one of the issues that DFES is raising is that the site is surrounded by what would be categorised as a broader landscape type B, which is something that the new framework really does, have a lot more sort of context around. And that is seen to be one of the major issues that they raise in terms of their assessment of risk, that because of the broader landscape, the unmanaged vegetation of the, joining regional open space forest, the topography, etc., that DFES's advice really centres on that broader landscape and that being part of that extreme bushfire risk. So do you see that spending more time on this is actually going to be able to mitigate that risk, which has been highlighted by DFES as probably the key issue, which is also a key part of the changes that were made to the state planning policy?
I think, and again, through yourself to answer the question, I think the city, DFES and the department all have a responsibility to find an appropriate solution for this community bushfire risk management perspective. How that translates into an urban development proposal or individual development applications for agricultural or tourism pursuits is all going to be an important part of its future moving forward. So I do think that there's a need to resolve what bushfire management and bushfire risk is within the Pickering Brook area. And I think for that reason, yes, we should pursue and get those documents updated to have that definitive understanding and position. With respect to this proposal, I still think it's something that needs to occur to make sure that we've got a solid baseline from which everyone is operating from. And if those risks and mitigation can be managed, and it's to a level that's acceptable by DFES and ultimately by the department and the city, we probably have a better solution moving forward. At the moment, there's probably some elements that still haven't been fully unearthed through the process.
And just to be clear, in your discussions, you're talking about the potential you're still advocating to have an increased fire service in the location, which is currently unfunded.
At this point, yes. We have identified a location, undertaken a business case development and detailed designs through the process of trying to advocate for a fire station, and council has invested in that piece of work nearly 2 years ago, as well as seeking to explore other measures to provide or mitigate bushfire risk at a sub-regional level or locality level, which again comes back to the increasing fire tanks, somewhere to stay and defend, which was the primary school, and alternative road access. So they're the new elements that have been brought to light as part of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Thanks for the deputation, and appreciate the responses to the questions have been really clear. So just to, 2 questions from me, just to explore a little bit further the updates to the bushfire reporting. So the city is taking responsibility as the applicant for the amendment to undertake the work with regard to bushfire? Yes. Okay, thank you. And then my second question was around, obviously an urban zoning under the region scheme allows a broad range of land uses. We've got a concept plan that we've seen to date, and obviously the ultimate developments it would evolve over time as constraints are understood and this work has been undertaken. But I'm interested to understand the intensity of development that is being proposed through the conversations that we're having with DFES, and what other land use options are being considered that could be consistent with an urban zone that could meet the bushfire requirements.
In a couple of parts, that's a good question. So I think with respect to defining what urban elements would come into play for that town site expansion. It was originally envisaged as more so a residential approach, acknowledging that the properties need to be large enough to probably avoid the need for sewer. So it would create a different lifestyle product that's not readily available within the city. Sorry, it is available within the hills, but not necessarily within Perth. So it'd be a different product mix. The other elements that would come into play would depend on the land uses. And in that regard, the city has the review of the local planning strategy and scheme, picking up on a lot of the Part A and B works from the task force, which is around the land use and the tourism elements, to really intensify, have a look at what tourism uses would be appropriate out in that area. Most of the city's collective aspirations, which come from the community, reside around either land uses or entertainment purposes, like breweries, something to support the orcharding community that's there. Tourism uses, so bed and breakfast somewhere close to stay, that would give an opportunity for people to enjoy that rural landscape. So they're probably the types of urban uses that are there. What we have is a town site that's rapidly in decline. And we see that with the school. We see school numbers going from 300 down to 200 down to 27 kids. The town needs an injection of investment, and one of the things we need to bring to that place is some people to make it function. So it's more likely that it would be some sort of residential mix, which would have individual fire controls notations on their title, which is where the strategic elements to play. I hope I answered the question for you about the rationale and the reasons and the land uses.
That's helpful. May I ask a follow-up
Sure.
question? Thank you. So you referenced around the lot sizes and the need to connect to sewer. So it is picked up as a P2 area, and connection to sewer is a requirement in a P2 area. Could you outline the city's position in relation to that priority 2 area, and how the discussions that you've had with DWER in that regard, and how you see that being managed?
Yeah, right through the hills, there's been lots of discussions with Department of Health and DWER around the application of how best to achieve the right types of outcomes with respect to dealing with wastewater. It wasn't the intent to have this area sewered. It was to try and find an alternative solution. And this goes back to the previous pathway around different types of treatment units, where they can be self-contained and managed, which was seen as less of an impact than some of the other types of uses, like a brewery, for example, which has high wastewater production. So while a tourism use might be seen as more appropriate, it could actually have a more detrimental or damaging impact on the environment than what a residential use would have. And so that piece of work still needed to flow through with detailed planning at later stages, but it acknowledged that lot sizes need to be more contemporary to meet the needs of government policy, while also best addressing increased population growth within that town centre.
Commissioner Herron, did you have a question?
Thank you. I did have a question, but it's been already covered off. I suppose one supplementary though would be, in terms of the notion of a deferral, and now that there's been clarification about the items that the city would be leading on in relation to that, is there a time frame? Because obviously having an open-ended deferral would be inappropriate, and is there any sense in terms of the time frame that would be required to get the information required?
For the chair, it's been a long journey to this date. You know, some 4 odd years we'll be discussing elements around this. We'd like to be on the clock. We would like to have the amendment initiated and be trying to work towards solutions, thereby binding the city and relevant agencies to try and find pragmatic solutions during that time period. Resolution to what the key issues are could be quite quick. I think those actions on the ground may take a bit longer, and I think the implementation of some of those actions might be beyond what the amendment can reasonably facilitate. But having clear agreement between DFIS, the Department, City, I think could be achievable within the assessment and of the amendment process. So.
But can I just ask though, I think you're being asked for a time frame because you're giving an undertaking that you'd like to review the BMP. This item has already been 1,766 days processing. So if you're seeking as your option B a deferral, could you please put a timeframe on review of the BMP and any other supporting documentation that you would like to provide?
So subject to receiving the peer review and having a clear understanding of what amendments DFIS and the department would like to see in that documentation, we could reasonably make that quite quickly and turn that around. Finding some of those more strategic resolutions may take a little bit more, and that would obviously impact any of the other elements that would come into the BMP or addressing the strategic bushfire risk. So the first part could be relatively quite quick, a couple of months to turn around that documents, but the ultimate resolution on the strategic matters could take a little bit, and that I'm unclear about. Would probably give us some breathing space and say 6 months to try and resolve all that to come together.
Yeah. We have talked about bushfire, but did you want to make any comments in relation to the water issues that have been raised, given that that was the other matter that that the report focuses on and is one of the grounds that the officers recommend refusal or not to initiate rather?
Yeah, we're a little bit surprised to see that, because we had felt that given the engagement up until that point that we had undertaken additional analysis and provided that information back to the department, and we understood that for the most part that had been resolved or was to a level of satisfaction. So we're a little bit surprised to see that that was a supporting reason of refusal. Happy to continue to work through what that would actually mean, and I think I have to double check here, but I think that's all under review now as well. I think there's some info through with respect to what the updated documents would look like from a state government perspective. So I'll park it there. I don't think I can really go into too much more depth on what that would look like. We'll need to try and solution to how best to address the water catchment. So that might come forward in a future level of planning.
Any further questions, Commissioner Sandry?
Thank you. Thank you for the deputation. Question is, so I understand the seeking for the urban underlying zoning to enable a combined approach between land uses and residential. However, there has been some further discussion around that tourism aspect and how that can activate the town site in other ways. Do you accept that if it remained as rural, tourism can still be considered within that town site, subject to meeting relevant policies and statutory requirements?
At this point in time, Salamander's scheme is very restrictive in the hills. The ability to pursue tourism ventures is very challenging and difficult by virtue of just even interrogating some of these top topics now with bushfire and water management and things like that. It will take some time. The city has embarked on working through its LPS, its local planning scheme, and its planning scheme to try and unpick those ways forward and better understand some of the key issues. So we've engaged with the Small Business Development Corporation just recently and undertaken a huge piece of work to journey map what it would take to get a brewery out of the ground, using Kalamunda as a reference point. That took the applicant 3.5 years and nearly $1 million of investment to be able to get a small brewery from taking it through the whole journey. And that was mapped with many state government departments right through. So we're starting to really understand what it's actually going to take for these applicants, these landowners, to be able to transition to these other types of land uses. It's a challenging journey. So what I suspect will happen is, unless there's a clear pathway forward for the landowners out there, we should see a change in land use, and it might be an unintended one. If we can't find those pathways for them to look after the rural landscape that's there, the orchards that are there, and I believe the orchardists, when they say they only get like 2 or 3 cents an apple, I'm not going to contest that. I think they'll look to other more creative solutions. And we recently prosecuted an individual who decided to relocate their car yard from Canning Vale, a wrecking car yard, up to hide amongst the trees in those land uses. I think we'll see more of those opportunistic things occurring. So a strong planning framework that articulates where development should be and where it shouldn't, and what needs to be protected and how best for it to be protected is going to be really important in this area moving forward. Giving as much certainty to the elements that are going to be required is going to be a very practical solution for the people in this area. So I hope that answers some of your questions about the impact of the decision and pathways that we need to try and pursue to try and unlock some potential for these landowners.
Thank you.
Any further questions, commissioners? No. Well, thank you very much, Nathan and Councillor Modolo, for your deputation today. We appreciate you joining us on what has been a long journey so far to this point, and we take your points on board and we'll discuss when we come to the item. So thank you for that. Just noting that that was our only verbal deputation for today, but we have received 3 written deputations, all in relation to this same item on the book site expansion. We have a deputation from Suzanne Marcinezzo, who is a Pickering Brook community member against. We have Christian Della Franca, Pickering Community Brook community against the recommendation, and Adam Hort, the member for Kalamunda, has also submitted a written deputation against the recommendation. So they are all of the deputations that we have received today. So we will now move to dealing with non-confidential items for today, and that is item 3.1. Commissioner Brooks is remaining outside the meeting room on an actual impartiality interest. So we're now dealing with 3.1, the proposed MRS amendment for the Pickering town site expansion, and we're joined by Anthony from the department. Thank you very much for joining us. Anthony and Oscar, we've had a deputation today from the City of Kalamunda. I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond to any of the matters raised, to raise any issues with us. We have had a briefing on this item, and we appreciate some additional information that has been provided to us since that briefing yesterday, but welcome you to make some comments and then we'll go to questions.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to acknowledge that the department has been working with the city for a long period of time on this, and it's been a very positive working relationship. So I just want to acknowledge that from the start. I won't go through all the components of the report. They're pretty clear in terms of the department's assessment, and essentially just to double confirm, I guess, the assessment's based on the information we've had to date. With the, particularly in relation to the bushfire matters, the bushfire management plan, and also the peer review, which is number of years out of date now. It is obviously not consistent with the latest SPP for bushfires. So that hasn't been updated. And I do want to acknowledge that over these years that we've been working on this, it's been made clear to the department that it is a government responsibility with bushfire, and in terms of any updating or application of that document or bushfire matters remained the commission or the department to investigate further. However, if that's now changed and there is an appetite to further investigate, and to be clear, it will cost significant funds, I guess, to update bushfire management plan and all the recommendations and test them in terms of the current proposal. That is all new information and that's a new direction. But in terms of what we currently have in front of us, the department's recommendation remains as it is. The advice from DFES is that it is an extreme bushfire risk, notwithstanding any potential mitigation measures. Even if they can be implemented, it remains of high risk category in terms of any potential land use for an urban residential land use. The other major issue is the water matters in terms of being within a priority 2 water catchment area, and there would need to be a variation of the policy should urban development be supported, and that's where the department has said, well, at this point in time, given the unresolved bushfire matters, which the advice from DFES is that it can't be mitigated to remove it from an extreme bushfire risk, that becomes a key consideration in terms of it doesn't comply with the policy either. Although I do acknowledge that a site and soil assessment or evaluation has been undertaken, it probably needs more work. So that's another matter for consideration, but essentially the position remains as it is at this point in time with the information we have. So that's probably the latest information I can provide, or additional information I can provide to the department's recommendation.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bennett.
Thanks, Oscar, for the report and for the begin to comment that the city made regarding the fact that the reports that are before us are not in terms of aligned policy regards to bushfire. Do you want to just make some comments in relation to the currency of the reports that are before us and how they relate to being presented since the project commenced?
Yes, I think the broad report has been considered in the draft, in the previous bushfire management plan. There was an effort to consider that. It would need to be substantially updated to comply with all the elements of the policy, the updated policy and the guidelines, and that would need to be tested with DFES, and that's where it hasn't. There are significant gaps in terms of that level of reporting and assessment that isn't available in that document. But putting that aside, even if that were updated, and I haven't spoken to DFES of late, we've only got the written advice, but the advice is that first element 1, in terms of the broader landscape, remains a substantial matter that won't be addressed and can't be addressed. So that seems to be a fundamental flaw. Now, whether that's a matter that the Commission would be prepared to set aside through an outcomes-based approach and a range of other matters is a different question. But with the information we have at this point in time, we feel that we haven't got a way to go forward. In terms of any update, I still suspect that there would need to be a level of interpretation and modification to variation to the policy in order to progress an urban zoning over the site. That's the view that we have from all the information and the discussion we have. You're going to get that.
Thank you.
Ms. Andrew?
Thank you, and thank you for the additional information and briefing, also the report. Just kind of thinking outside the box here, so as I understand from the deputation, the written submissions and documentation, it's likely that this area is going to be a combination of two things. One, housing, not dense housing, but lifestyle typology, and tourism. At the moment, the MRS rezoning is seeking 2 lots fundamentally to be rezoned to urban under the MRS. Is there a scenario in which you can part zone a lot under the MRS or in fact scale it back during that initiation phase to respond to any of the submissions that are received to be able to actually mitigate some of those risks on site?
Zones are pretty limited in terms of where we could go to. So it would either be an urban zone or an urban deferred zone or a combination of both. So I think if the Commission wants to go down the path, we would say we would probably recommend maybe a deferral to allow assessment of those matters and assessment of, and I think an important part of an urban zoning is the land use. I think it is really important in this site. So I think the ultimate land use we've always discussed for years has been a residential land use. If there are different land uses, then the bushfire policy applies differently. That's what we don't know. So we've only assessed it based on what the proposed ultimate land use has been. So if there's going to be a combination of different land uses which the city may be exploring, then we would look at it differently, and the DFES would look at it differently. That's one of the conversations I did have with DFES. It depends on the land use. At this point in time, urban residential, that's what they've assessed it against. So if there's going to be a combination of different land uses, we would need to really know that up front.
So I guess the question is there an opportunity to retain a site, like let's look at one lot, part of the lot retain as rural for the purposes of tourism, which you can do under the MRS, under the rural zone, and part of the lot is urban to enable that remaining rural area of that lot to be the mitigating factor for, let's say, some of these bushfires.
So under an urban investigation category, under PEEL, it doesn't necessarily need to be urban. So the ultimate land use is probably important. So you could have a combination of that, but you probably want a structure plan or some sort of guidance document that puts all that together. So it's very clear in terms of how it all works in together. And I suspect DFES would want something like that.
And is it common when we receive MRS amendments for the scope to change during initiation?
Generally, we know very clear up front. The substantial test of the region scheme is right up front prior to initiation. So once an amendment's been initiated, the land use doesn't really change afterwards. It's really difficult to change it. It would need to go through the EPA, it gets advertised based on that sort of land use. So yes, you could come up with something different at the end. It's unusual, it's highly unusual. Normally, once it's initiated, more than 95% of the time they get finalised as advertised. Or even higher than that.
And sorry, between the initiation and advertising, is there some to and fro? Like, for example, in this case, removing part of the urban to retain rural as an example?
It would need to be done after advertising. There's no other opportunity. So it would be ideal to do that up front, to know through some sort of strategic planning, through structured planning, to know what components would be, what land uses would be assigned within that area. So some of it may remain rural, some of it may go to urban or urban deferred zoning if there's further work to be undertaken. So we would need, that will be a lot of work up front.
And when we initiate MRS amendments, is it are there situations where some matters aren't resolved and in fact they're facilitated through that initiation period?
Correct, there is. There are matters that we think are resolvable in further work and that aren't fatal flaws. I think the bushfire issue here is a very high bar to pass and to push down the line in terms of trying to address later on. I think that is a critical fundamental issue. And we've learned from the past in this area, in the Hills area in general, with all the land that's been zoned urban over the years, it's gotten to this crunch point and it's been through structure planning where we've gotten stuck. I mean, there are other examples there at the moment. We've had land we're requested to unzone from urban because of the bushfire risk is so insurmountable and so difficult to address that they can't have an urban residential pattern of development. So that's been a major issue. So we would say that there are matters that can be resolved later. I think the effluent disposal probably is a matter that needs some level of assessment, but can be resolved. The bushfire is the critical one that needs an upfront resolution to it, because that really would influence whether the land goes to urban or not. That would be the critical thing. Because once it's gone to urban, there should be no doubt that it can't be developed for that use. Because it would be unfair to landowners to zone land urban and then say to them, oh, well, you can't have that land use because we've investigated it further. The level of risk that's passed down the process, and that would be really unfair to do that. The whole intent of the MRS and the policy of the SPP, by the way, is to try and address this right up front. And we've got real examples where this has happened over the years.
And just two other questions, that's helpful. So thank you. I appreciate that. Is it in the framework in terms of bushfire? My understanding from reading the framework is that under the outcomes-based assessment, is it true to say that you don't actually have to meet any of the requirements? You can say it doesn't meet it and these are the reasons why, and it's an objective-based assessment. Is that correct?
The Commission would need to form a view that the outcomes and the mitigation measures would be appropriate in perpetuity for the site. Yeah. Actually, we're based on that.
And is there a way in which initiation can occur subject to X, Y, and Z being undertaken to avoid the need for a decision to come back to the Commission and rather proceed straight through to advertising?
The Commission has done that where matters are a sort of a temporal nature where they just need to be resolved. So say, for example, servicing is an issue that is very close to resolution. So the Commission said, we'll initiate the amendment, but we won't progress it any further until that matter is resolved. Once we get an okay from Water Corporation, for example, then we can progress it through the system. So it doesn't have to come back to the Commission. So yes, there is an opportunity to do that. But again, being the nature of the issue and the extreme bushfire risk that exists, I think it needs to be resolved up front prior to any initiation.
Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anthony. Really, it's a follow-on from a lot of the questions already. The city has indicated preference for a deferral to enable a lot of these discussions, and obviously, I think the key issue is obviously DFAS, and the point that you talked about needing to work on understanding what the zoning is, a bit more detail to then inform a BMP or an updated BMT. The city indicated a period of up to 6 month deferral. What's your view in terms of that sort of time frame to achieve all of those outcomes that you just talked through just now? Is that realistic?
The Chair, I don't know exactly how long it would take, but I think it may be more than 6 months.
Just on that, Anthony, can you just describe the liaison that you've had with the City of Kalamunda more recently on the bushfire management plan and the feedback that you've provided to them? Their, what they had intended to do in terms of updates?
Yes, so the recent discussion last week in terms of the recommendation that was being proposed, but the last contact was probably sometime last year, and it was a general discussion in terms of we had basically exhausted all the options to address bushfire matters, and this remained an unresolved matter that had no proponent addressing it at that point in time. I'm hearing that the city are prepared to undertake that work and do additional work, which is a slight change to where the position was from before, but that was our understanding of where it was at. And we do understand that from other outcomes-based assessments, I'm assuming that would need to be undertaken for this site, it is a substantial financial investment that would need to be undertaken, be substantial.
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you, Anthony, for answering all of our questions. So just to follow on from Commissioner Blakey's question around the deferral, there's the potential, as the city has requested, to defer on the basis that there's further investigations undertaken around bushfire. Would it be reasonable? I hear what you're saying around the water is a matter that may not be a fundamental flaw that may be able to be resolved. Would it be reasonable to include as a reason for deferral further discussions between DPLH City and Dwyer Department of Health to progress that matter?
With the chair, yeah, I think so. I think that would be wise to do that, because the additional investigation, the site and soil assessment, did a couple of sites which were not meeting the 2 metre vertical clearance to the groundwater, and I think that the time that the investigation was undertaken wasn't the wettest time of the year either. But that may need further investigation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioners, any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Then we will move to consideration of the item. Members, I know that some of you may be contemplating where to go with this, but perhaps if we commence by dealing with the recommendation before us, I'd recommend that as the best path forward, if deferral being a procedural motion that can follow if necessary. But if I seek a mover and seconder for the recommendation before us as a starting point, that's moved by Commissioner Adair, seconded by Commissioner Herron. Commissioner Adair, do you wish to speak to the item?
No, I don't, Chair. I think that everything that Anthony has said makes it very clear for me to support this recommendation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Herron?
Thank you. Yes, and I similarly hold the view that based on the information presented at that point in time, I fully support the position that the officers have taken. Based on the changing situation and additional information to light, I would be open to a potential deferral, but on the basis of what is currently before us, I'm prepared to support the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Herron. Commissioner Lakey?
Sorry, Chair. Am I able to foreshadow an alternative motion?
An alternative motion, you can foreshadow, yes.
Look, I based on the information that we've provided, and I note the detailed report and supporting documentation from DPLH. I also commend the deputation as well from the city, which is very clear and concise. Based on the information I have, I would support the condition, but I also would like to foreshadow a deferral as well, to give time for this additional discussion, particularly with DFES and the deferral of 6 months.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Lakey. That's a procedural motion, so that's not a problem. I thought you were going to suggest an alternative approach. So yes, that's noted. Thank you very much. But we'll like to allow further discussion to occur before moving to the procedural motion. Commissioners, any further commentary? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I'm not supportive of the recommendation as proposed by the officers and the motion that's before us on the basis of the deputation that's been provided by the city today and the request that the city undertake further bushfire work to address the comments of DFES. And given the city have acknowledged that they are the proponent of the amendment and prepared to undertake that work, then I see it appropriate if the city is requesting for a deferral that we provide them with that opportunity. But in making that statement, I definitely would like to make it clear that it's in no way a signal that I see that all the fundamental flaws in relation to the land are able to be resolved, and it's simply providing additional time to address those matters, being bushfire, but also the public drinking water source area.
Thank you. I'll just go to Commissioner Hall first. Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Look, yeah, I don't support the officer's recommendation. I was surprised to see it, particularly after hearing the City of Kalamunda talk about their proposal and wanting to progress it, and hearing that the documentation hasn't been updated following policy changes and their ongoing engagement and consultation. So I was surprised to see it. And I'd like to see a deferral to allow more time for those matters to be addressed so it can be presented to us in an updated fashion.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you. I too am not supportive of the recommendation in front of us. I think I accept why the recommendation is what it is based on the information that is available presently in terms of written documentation before the department. So and I thank the department certainly for the work over the past, how long has it been? 6 years? 4 years, 4 or 5 years. So, you know, quite some time working through it, and appreciate that when a policy framework changes, it does throw things up in the air in terms of, okay, well, where do we go from here? And often bringing these matters before the commission allows a clear line of sight in terms of what's next and what's required. I think that in this scenario, it probably requires the department agencies out in terms of DFES coming to the party and looking at this more strategically alongside with the city and the Department of Planning. I think that there's probably ways in which that outcomes-based assessment can be achieved in a creative way. And that was partly why I was asking those questions relating to, can you part zone a lot, etc. So therefore you can maintain those risks on site and manage those risks on site where appropriate, accepting that there is a portion of land opposite the road that is unmanaged, that is difficult with DBCA, but maybe the city can come to some sort of arrangement with DBCA regarding the management of that land. It was also comforting to hear that the city is taking a more strategic approach in terms of its ways of dealing with bushfire in that part of the region in Greenbrook town site, looking at additional water capacity and other strategic locations for further firefighting instruments. So that's also positive. So I think it would be a missed opportunity if I was to support the recommendation currently, as the city is willing to provide that additional information and work with DFES on the matter, and I would be supporting the procedural motion when that's tabled.
Thank you, Commissioner Shears.
I appreciate the officers, hard work on this for the number of years and understand exactly why your recommendation is what it is. Again, I also am not supportive of the recommendation today. I do think it's easy for us to sort of just make that very quick, not quick, but from your point of view, but that assessment today. But I think we owe it to the town and also this community to really have a good look at this again and then just do whatever we possibly can to see if there are any other options. So for that reason, I would be supportive of deferral.
Thank you. Have all members spoken? Yes. Look, I would just, I see the mood in the room for deferral and I respect that. I would just say that we do need to proceed with caution and set, if that is the way this is going, which it appears it is, we'd have to set a really tight time frame on this. I do understand why the officers have made this recommendation to us today, because this is new information from the City of Kalamunda that they want to update the bushfire management plan. Based on what the officers have informed us, that hasn't been the case, and this information that's been presented has not been presented to the officers ahead of the meeting. Whilst the BMP is out of date in terms of it being prepared before the update to the state planning policy for bushfire, DFS has considered in detail that broader landscape issue, and they have categorised the landscape as broader landscape category B. And I do believe that in deferring this, one of the things that is likely to occur here is that the City of Kalamunda will go away, honour their word, do this work at some expense, come back to us, and that we are likely to land in the same situation because the issues that DFS are raising are very significant. They're talking about catastrophic risk, and it is really based on that broader landscape plan. If you look at the BMP, it talks about things like requiring DBCA to have a 3-yearly cycle in terms of their bushfire maintenance. And the response is that that is not the program that DBCA run. Some of the assumptions made in that bushfire plan are going to be very, very difficult to overcome. Discussing whether there's going to be investment in a new fire service within the town site. You know, how long will that take? Where is that investment going to come from? You know, we talked about, we asked questions yesterday about the bushfire risk to the Pickering town site itself and some of the issues that are being raised there. There's also discussion from DFS about the fact that even if there is an urban zoning here at that 2,000 square metre lot size, that once you take into consideration Bell 29 within the site, that the setbacks and the siting of the homes could lead to very limited development, and that their main issue is that even achieving a Bell 29 within the site, whether that's through buffering with tourism uses, etc., that doesn't change that broader landscape risk. So I understand the point that commissioners are making today, but I do think that we're setting an incredibly difficult bar for the City of Kalamunda to overcome in finding a bushfire management plan that can mitigate that extreme bushfire risk, and to come back to us in 6 months' time talking about longer term solutions like a bushfire service, a new fire service. It's going to be very difficult, and I think in 6 months' time we may have a little bit more information, but then we're going to be dealing with the core issues that exist today. So I respect the desire to have that updated information, but I suspect that it's not going to fundamentally change where we are and that we're dealing with something of significant risk here. We're also needing to take that broader perspective about other actions that the WAPC are currently involved in the Perth Hills and those sorts of risk assessments that are currently being made. So I was comfortable to support this recommendation as it stands, but acknowledge that there is some work to be done by the city, and they've given that undertaking today. And it then is incumbent upon them to honour that commitment in a tight time frame. So is there a procedural motion?
Commissioner Lakey move it. Foreshadowed.
No, he foreshadowed. Would you like to move a procedural motion, Commissioner Lakey?
Yes, happy to do that for a deferral for a period of 6 months.
Is there a seconder for the procedural motion? Seconded by Commissioner Bennett. It's a procedural motion, so there is no discussion. Is there any dissent to the procedural motion?
Yeah, may I just ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Does there need to be some reasoning behind it, as in terms of why it's being deferred, for what reason?
Yes, you are correct. That would be, I mean, we've discussed it, but perhaps Commissioner Lakey, if you could just provide the clarity on the issues, or Commissioner Bennett as a seconder, that you would like to see addressed within the 6 months.
Sure, thank you, Chair. Look, as I'm not going to go over the whole conversation that we've had here. I think based on the deputation from the City of Kalamunda, which has indicated willingness to do some further information and work and gain some more reporting on the, particularly on the DFS, the fact that that information hasn't come to DPLH at this stage. I'm happy to propose a deferral for 6 months regarding that further work and to upgrade the BMP and also to assess the zoning requirements that relate to and the uses that relate to the BMP.
Do commissioners want to add anything to the grounds for deferral?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similarly to Commissioner Lakey, it would be a deferral on the basis that additional investigations are undertaken between the city and DFES, with the city submitting the information to DPLH. Acknowledging the comments that are made by the officers and the comments made by the Chair, I do urge the city to, in the first instance, investigate the landscape aspects of the proposal and the current guidelines, or SPP, before proceeding with the body of work as an outcomes-based assessment as well. So see that as a first gateway. And then the second reason for deferral would be further investigation between DWER, Department of Health, DPLH and the city regarding resolution of development within a public drinking water source area prior to the matter being presented back to WAPC. And as I mentioned in my comments previously, for me as a seconder, it is in no way a signal of my support for a future MRS amendment. Sorry.
Chair, there's just one more.
Would you like to add some land use considerations?
Yes, the first one is just for the city to respond to the department's advice that they've received from the independent bushfire management assessment that peer review. And also the latest advice from DFES that the department has received. And then the fourth aspect will be actual land use considerations in order to genuinely try and address the bushfire issues raised by DFES and the new, the revised planning framework that it sits with.
Thank you. Is that been captured? Does the minute taker need any clarification?
I've got some notes as
Got notes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a procedural motion for deferral. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried and the item is deferred for 6 months. Thank you very much, Anthony and Oscar. Okay, so that concludes our non-confidential items for this meeting. I will ask for a mover and seconder that we go behind closed doors to consider confidential items. Thank you, Commissioner Sandry. Any dissent? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you very much for joining us today.